The dog won't hunt no more. Birmingham was like an oven. The first night I couldn't sleep at all. Me and Vi had to share a bed and we both were sweating like two pigs. It got so hot that Byron couldn't even keep a sheet on himself to make sure I didn't accidentally touch him on at night. He finally slept on the floor because it was a little bit cooler. When I got up, Byron was gone. I looked out the window into the backyard, and Vi and Dad and Mr. Roberts were standing under a great big tree with a dog. I went to the bathroom real quick, did my morning scratches. Then I ran out to be with the guys. Morning, Kenny. Morning, Dad. Morning, Mr. Robert. Morning. Bye. Vi just grunted. Then said, Man, you gotta quit drinking so much water. You sweated up the whole bed last night. I ain't sharing the bed with your leaky little butt. He looked at Dad. With your leaky little self again. Mr. Robert said, You boys will get used to the heat. Dad petted the dog and said, He's too old to hunt? Oh, yeah, that dog won't hunt no more. He's just old like me. Lost the desire. Both of us got to the point where we just couldn't pull the trigger. Both of us got to be like Joe Louis towards the end. Remember that last fight, Daniel? Remember how Joe just woke up around the ring, waving his left fist like a threat? He just couldn't throw it. He just couldn't pull the trigger. No, he couldn't pull the trigger no more. My mind told him, his mind told him to do it, but his body wouldn't cooperate. That's me, Toddy. There's times at night I hear him howl, and I know he's dreaming about being back in the woods, but both of us know that's gone. Mr. Robert bent down and rubbed the dog's head. Yeah, son. His day was the best coon dog in all Alabama. I used to get $100 just to stud him. Byron rubbed his old, gray, nasty-looking dog's head, too. $100? Man. Yeah, me and Toddy. We saved each other's lives. Hate seeing him to get old. Judging by the way Mr. Roberts looked, I bet the dog was saying the same thing about him. How'd he save your life? You'd ever been coon hunting? No, sir. Well, there ain't too much animals wilier and tougher than an old coon. Most people think they just chase them up a tree and pop them, but that ain't half the story. Toddy's trailed the coon all the way out to this lake, and then the coon went into the water. Now, most of the time, a dog will stop right in the water. They know better than to go in, but Toddy must have just drove right off it and after the coon. He must have been half a mile ahead of me when I heard him holler, and then I got real quiet. Then it got real quiet. What happened? The coon got him in the water and held his head under until he drowned him. I stopped believing this junk right there and then. A raccoon drowning a dog? I looked at Vi and Dad, and they both were believing what Mr. Roberts was saying. Dad said, I heard about coons doing that. Oh, yeah, Toddy said. Here's living proof. Byron said, if he drowned, how come he ain't dead? Well, he finally got out to the lake, and I saw the coon pointing out one way, and Toddy's nowhere in sight. And I knew what happened. I dove in the water and started looking for him. It took me only a minute. And I dragged him back to shore, and I turned him upside down and let the water run out of him. Held his mouth shut, and breathed right in his nose, and he kicked a couple of times, and then he came to. Byron said, Man, that's too much. That's cool. All I could think of was Mr. Roberts was probably the only human being who'd ever been put his mouth on a dog's nose. That was pretty cool. I asked Dad, when do we eat? Kenny, you're the only one who hasn't eaten already. Your mother and grandmother are in the kitchen. Go in. So I went back inside. Even before I got in, I could hear Mama saying Birmingham wasn't anything like she remembered. Her favorite saying was, What's this? And how long's this been like that? And When did that happen? And why do you do this like that? And most of all, oh, Mama. Grandma Sands thought Mama was hilarious and cracked up every time Mama got upset or worried about something that she didn't remember or didn't like. Grandma Sands must have seen The Wizard of Oz a million times because every time she laughed, she sounded like that old wicked witch of the West. At first, her laugh was so scary that whenever me and Joey heard it, we wanted to go get behind something or someone. But after a while, we got used to it. It took us even longer to get used to the southern style of talking. Man, Grandma Sands and Mama would get yakking to each other, and we could only understand half the things they said. The smell of bacon dragged me right into the kitchen, and Mama and Joey and Grandma Sands were sitting on the little skinny kitchen table yakking. Morning, Kenneth. Morning, Mama. Morning, Joey. Morning, Grandma Sands. You sleep okay? It was real hot. Joey was sitting on Mama's lap looking all drowsy and said, I know, I was sweating all night. The bacon was sitting on a plate on a piece of paper towel. And Mama had another piece of paper towel in her hands because all the things that Grandma Sands was telling her was making her hands get all sweaty and disgusting. I got some cereal and bread and bacon and sat at the skinny table with them. I must have interrupted something real important because as soon as I sat down, Mama acted like I disappeared and started asking Grandma Sands more questions. Well, what about Calla Lily Lincoln? I always wondered what she was doing. Oh, Lona, didn't I write you about this? And kept on talking and kept oohing and eyeing, and Grandma Sands kept on interrupting breakfast by scaring me and Joey with that laugh. And Mama kept saying, oh, Mama, and kept on having to get up and get more paper towels to wipe her hands. And most of all, she kept talking more and more Southern style. They talked about how much trouble people were having with some white people down here who got married to who, how many kids one had, how many times the one was in jail, a bunch of boring junk like that. I didn't get too interesting until I noticed that Mama got real nervous right before she said, and what about you, Mama? Mr. Robert seems like a nice man and all, but Grandma gave her a laugh, and a spoon flew out of my hand and spilled my cornflakes on the table. Mama acted like she didn't even notice, but without even looking, she handed me one of the nasty, soaking, wet pieces of paper towel she kept looking at Grandma Sands. I was wondering when he get to that, Grandma says, smiles. We've been good friends since right after, all you left for Flint. Mama, being kind of rude, she interrupted and said, oh, Mama, good friends? What does that mean? Well, Lona Sands, what is it that's bothering you? Why don't you just come out and say what's on your mind? Mama started wringing her neck and another piece of paper towel. I just don't understand what's going on here. How come I never knew him? Did Daddy know him? Mama said that last part like she was dropping a bomb on Grandma Sands. Grandma Sands looked at her for a minute. Lona, things are different from what they were when you left. Nearly everything changes. Your daddy's been gone for almost 20 years. Grandma Sands stopped smiling. Now, Mr. Robert is my dearest friend. Wow. I could see where Byron learned how to say a couple words and have people think he'd said a whole couple of words and have them think they said a whole bunch more. Grandma Sands didn't yell, didn't scream or anything, but the way she said those couple of words, those things, making everybody who heard them shut their mouths. And I listened real hard, even though she only told Mama that Mr. Robert was her friend. It seemed like I heard her also give my mother a real good scolding. Mama pouted and kissed the top of Joey's head. I picked up the spoon and kept eating. This was great. I'd never seen Mama act like that, like a little kid who just got yelled at. But there she was, picking a piece of paper towel and looking kind of embarrassed. Dad and Byron came in with Mr. Robert. Mr. Robert's going to walk us over to the lake, show us the best fishing spots for later. Joey, Kenny, are you coming? Give those two some time alone to talk. Mama pushed Joey off her lap and followed the little parade outside. The heat made me and Joey feel like we couldn't wake up. I didn't want to do any walking, but the dirty dogs made me go anyway. The only kid that acted like he was having any fun was Byron. He walked the whole way with Mr. Robert and Dad and laughed and joked with them about every stupid story they told. When we finally got back, I went to sleep under a fan. They were going to force me to go fishing with Byron and Joey the next day. I knew I needed a ton of rest. I started to think about making Byron spend all of his summer in this heat, with more punishment than any juvenile delinquent like him deserved. But he seemed to like it. He was having a great time.